Welcome to our third podcast for IT Career Hacking. This is Jeff Baird, and today I have with me Lauren Shipley.
Good morning.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Lauren Shipley. I am an account manager at Apex Systems. We're an IT staff and consulting firm. I like to call myself a matchmaker. I help people find the job of their dreams, and I help clients find the candidate of their dreams and match them up.
Awesome. So Lauren and I are going to team up this Saturday at the Big Mountain Data and Dev Conference. So most people will probably be listening to this after the fact, but if you happen to listen to it today or tomorrow, then it's not too late to sign up for that. It's a free conference that's downtown Salt Lake and is a great opportunity, as we'll see with the topic of the podcast today, a great way to start making connections that can help your long-term career. So we'll be speaking on this same topic, but we'll elaborate more. We're going to do a broader version of what this podcast is talking about on Saturday. So what are we talking about? Mountain Dew, one of my favorite topics. Although I've been Mountain Dew free for how many months now? Mountain Dew Anonymous. So Mountain networking. We're going to talk about networking, and I'll come back to the Mountain Dew thing here in a second. But I want to tell you a story from my childhood. So this is my dad and his dental staff from a long time ago. He was a dentist. And I remember as a kid, we went to this restaurant, and there was a waitress there that was so awesome. She was personable. She was good at what she did. She could build an instant rapport with the people that she was serving. And she was so good at what she did that my dad ended up making a job offer to her right there on the spot. He had a difficult time sometimes finding good staff, especially the ones that were at the front desk, since that's kind of the first impression of his dental office when people come in. And she was so good at what she was doing that he just made her a job offer right there at the restaurant. And she accepted, and this is her on the far left. She stayed with his dental practice for, I don't know how long, probably a decade or so, and was great. She was great at what she did. And I didn't really realize how unusual that was when I was a kid, but thinking back on it now, how cool would that be to just be going through the normal course of your day and have job opportunities coming to you? And have just land on your lap. That's awesome. And it probably doesn't work out quite that cleanly most of the time, but in a way we can get there. That's what a lot of these hacks are about, is to manage your career such that you can just go through your normal day and keep doing a good job and meeting people, and then good opportunities are going to come your way. So you might remember from the first podcast, this visualization, the front door approach for getting a job, applying for a job through a website. Only about 20% of jobs are advertised in the first place. And then only 20% of those get interviews. So where my mind goes is to that other 80%. Who's getting the other 80%? And as we've already talked about, it's people that you know and people that are in your network. But what comes to mind when I first heard that is, does this mean I have to start going to networking events and go small talk, go socialize? If you're, do you like those, Lauren? I'm not a big fan of traditional networking events.
I think it depends on the networking event. I've had some that are very successful and that are fun, but then sometimes I'm just dreading them. I think just depending on the topics and the people. Sometimes they've been very helpful though. So it's hard to put yourself out there because it's kind of awkward, especially if you go alone. But I found that some have been very successful.
Yeah, the awkwardness is what I feel. Especially if you're an introvert, I'm more of an ambivert, so it depends on the situation. But going to one of those events is usually awkward, especially how we do just tend to do small talk and rather than having meaningful conversations.
Yes.
But I've noticed something that highlights a principle that we'll talk about here. If you were to go to a networking event and it was if it was all people that you knew, if they're all friends at the networking event, then that's easy. That's not a big deal. You'll have a good time. That's more like a party, not a networking event. And if you're in that situation and a casual acquaintance, maybe from your work, walks in the door, you might notice them, but you're not going to pay a whole lot of attention to them because you have all your other friends that you can associate with. But if you change the scenario and you're in a room full of strangers and that exact same casual acquaintance comes in, then you're drawn to them. You want to be, there's something familiar in the room, and so you're going to be more likely to go talk to that person and hang out with that person just because the familiarity. And so that's touching on a principle that we like. We are social creatures, but we like familiarity. We like similarity. So where this can really come into work too is if this is where most of the job opportunities are coming from, then the bigger your network, then the more opportunities you're going to have. I remember my very first IT job. It was kind of embarrassing how little I knew about IT. So this is probably
you and me both.
Hopefully I've made some ground now, but about 2000 I realized I knew nothing about computers. I had my girlfriend at the time was trying to help me install I think it was MSN Messenger. This was maybe on the tail end of AOL too, but she was trying to help me install this messaging service. And she's like, all right, you're going to download this. There's going to be an icon on your desktop. And that was already over my head, which is super embarrassing to admit. So I decided I needed to fix that. I needed to start learning something about computers. They're not going anywhere, so I better understand them. And so I went and applied for a job doing technical support. And I was like, I have no chance of getting this job because I don't know anything. But I had my stepbrother is the one that introduced me to the job. He got me the interview. And at the interview, they gave me this questionnaire to see how much I knew. And there was not one single question on that assessment that I could answer.
Wow.
So I handed him the empty sheet. And I can't answer any of these, but I can learn. And they took a chance on me, said they'd train me up. And I think a large reason for that was because I had that referral. I had somebody that gave the connection to me and helped me get the interview in the first place. And so I was thrown in the deep end of the pool. And since then, I went on to get my bachelor's in computer science and everything. But it all started with just having a connection. So Mountain Dew, I better bring up the Mountain Dew thing before I forget. What does Mountain Dew have to do with managing your career? Well, it's more than just this magical power that programmers have to convert caffeine into code. I was a consultant for a while, and so I was on site with different clients pretty regularly. And one client in particular I landed at, and my traditional comfortable approach was to just put my head down and work, to sit in my cube and crank out ETL code. But I got invited to go on a drink run where a group of the people would go down to the gas station nearby where we were working, and they'd get a Mountain Dew or a Coke or something like that. And when they first invited me, my initial thought was, I just want to get my job done. I want to work hard, produce good results. This is a distraction, and it's kind of uncomfortable because I don't know these people. But I went ahead and agreed to go with them, and I started going to lunches with them. And that started forming bonds and connections that has benefited me throughout the whole rest of my career. I was able to meet people that helped me get promotions and to get raises and to get other job opportunities. And it also put me in a position to help other people, because as my network was expanding, then I could also assist other people in finding those kinds of opportunities. So all starting with that network connection. Social capital and networks then. So how do we build out these networks, and why are they so important in the first place? There's used to be these tools, there probably still are, that you could connect to your Facebook or your LinkedIn profile, and it would visually show you where all of your circles, where your tribes, where your networks are. So you might have a big one like this blue one that is your professional network, people that you work with in your IT job. But you might have another one over here for your church. You could have one for your gym. You could have one for whatever you're into. There's going to be tribes around that and people that are in your network. So I wish I could find a tool like this again, at least a free one, so I could see where all my networks are.
Yeah, that's really cool looking too. Just to visually see it.
Mm-hmm. So some of my personal tribes, I guess I already mentioned them. It's church, it's gym, it's work. As part of my speaking career, I now have a speaking and corporate training circle that I'm a part of. And that network is the way that you can get more job opportunities. So what are some of your networks, Lauren?
So mine are very similar since I also do speaking, but I have business development groups that I'm a part of. I have my gym buddies that I'm with. I have my hip hop dance class buddies, church, childhood friends, and then kind of my acquaintancy groups, like my book clubs and stuff like that as well. And then obviously work as well.
So tons of circles of people, and it doesn't have to be people that are part of your network or part of your professional network in order to get job opportunities. I've had interviews that come from just hanging with people at the gym. So there's power in building out this network. And if you've ever heard that we're only 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon.
I have, and I've like decided maybe I should track down these 6 degrees and go meet Kevin Bacon myself.
Yeah, I wonder if he's on LinkedIn, then we can find out. We're so connected now to people that even if we don't know somebody that knows a job opportunity, we probably know somebody who knows somebody. And so once again, connecting and leveraging that network can be powerful. And if it's not just, it goes beyond just knowing somebody, because we all know people that we would never hire. It's usually the bless their hearts, right? But if people see us, in fact, I probably have a slide here somewhere. All right, I'll find it later. If people see us as likable and trustworthy, if they like us and they think we could do a good job, then they'll think of us when opportunities come up, or they're more willing to try to get us an interview. And so go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, what I have found too is just obviously in the recruiting industry, we ask for referrals. We say, do you know anyone that's in the market? And it's interesting. It's usually almost like the connection removed. So like your second degree connections where we find the referrals. So I think it's important to think about too, is as you mentioned, like putting yourself out there, not only to your friends, but to meet their networks as well. Because I think that's where a majority of our referrals come from, are those second degree connections as opposed to your closer tribes and your closer connections.
That's cool. In fact, that's probably a good segue into this slide then, because that's the other misconception I had when I started looking into the power of networks. I was thinking of the practicality of it. I said, I can't be close personal friends with that many people. I just don't have enough time. But in this study, they found that where most of the job opportunities come from is, quote, weak ties. It's the acquaintances, or like you said, the second degree connections. The bulk is still people that we know. If you add up 56 and 17, that's still most of the opportunities. But from that, it's almost all the acquaintances. And so that's also good news, because you don't have to spend tons of time to develop these deep relationships. It's just connecting with them in some way. And like you mentioned, even if it doesn't help you with the first degree connection, they may know somebody, or they may know somebody that knows somebody.
Exactly. And I think we'll get into this later on in the slide, but I think it's about like if you're making these connections with these secondary people, having almost like a game plan, especially if you're at a network, kind of having your end goal of what you want to accomplish and kind of finding a way to segue the conversation to bring that up so that they do remember you for the things that you're wanting them to remember you for.
Excellent. why does this work anyway? Why are these circles and these networks so important? It's because we spend most of the decisions we make are not with our more evolved thinking portion of our brain. Most of our behaviors and decisions are driven by a primitive part of our brain, more emotional, more impulsive part of the brain that first and foremost cares about safety. And eons ago, we as a species found that there was safety in numbers, and that there was safety in being part of a tribe rather than being just by yourself. When you have a collective, when you have a tribe, then you have protection. You can combine your strengths and weaknesses to mitigate and compensate the weaknesses so that you can have a better existence, so you can live better. And so this gets very primal for us to want to be part of tribes and to want to be part of circles. And these can be, great topics of conversation too, as you're meeting people, as you're meeting someone, to connect with them and show that you're in a similar tribe. So I used to do a lot of obstacle racing, and they always give you a cool t-shirt at the races, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of them in particular was the Tough Mudder race. And if you're bored this afternoon, then YouTube the electroshock therapy Tough Mudder.
Oh, I've seen it. My friend just did it.
So did she go through the electric shock?
Yeah, like that looks terrible. Who does that? That looks terrible.
It is pretty terrible. They have you run they have a whole bunch of different obstacles, and one of them they have wires with 10,000 volts of electricity going through them. So there's some hilariously disturbing videos you can watch of people going through that. But you get a cool t-shirt that says Tough Mudder on it, and it says, probably the toughest event on the planet. And I'll wear that when I'm flying around the country, and people recognize that. If I'm in Boston or I'm in San Diego, doesn't matter where I am, people see my shirt, and they're like, oh, yeah, Tough Mudder, and did you do the electric shock therapy? And we all share our horror stories. It was a way of connecting with other people. And you'll see that with shirts or with like sports teams or colleges.
Yeah.
People will see that, and it makes an instant bond and connection with people because of this tribal nature, and starts to build up that familiarity and trust to connect to people.
Yeah, I have that actually with my sorority. It's really fun because obviously sororities have been around since the early 1900s, and I've like been on a plane before and had all my sorority letters, and an old lady will come up to me and say like our secret password, and like even right then and there, such a huge bond with this woman that I probably would have never met in my entire life. And it's so cool just based off of the experience that we've gone through. It doesn't even have to be in the same room that we had those experiences, but the connection that we automatically feel with that person.
Which is way cool. They have secret passwords, huh?
We do.
Nice. That's good. I think Tough Mudders need a secret password now.
Oh, totally.
Something that will get us out of having to do the electroshock therapy, hopefully. So think about your networks, but there's another facet here that I think is interesting. Another reason why these networks can work and be so powerful. And this comes from a book I like called The Like Switch, written by Jack Schaefer. He's a former FBI guy, and he's the one that came up with this friendship formula. At the very beginning of the book, it's telling a story where he's tasked with getting information from a spy. And so he's walked into this room, and there's a spy sitting there at the interrogation table, and he needs to try to get information out of him. And so what he does is, over the course of some long period of time, he'll walk into the room, and he goes and sits in the corner, and he just picks up a newspaper and puts it in front of his face and reads for the whole hour of time that he's with the guy. And then he'll get up and leave. And he does this over and over again for a while. And the guy's, the spy is like wondering what's going on here. And he finally asks him, he says, "What are you doing here?" And he lowers the newspaper down a little bit and says, "Oh, I just want to talk to you." And then he puts the newspaper back up in front of his face and keeps reading. And then eventually the guy says, "All right, I'll talk, but not about secrets or anything like that. I don't have the secret passwords for the sororities." And so Jack's like, all right, that's cool. And so then they just talk. They just chit chat and get to know each other. Eventually, over time, the spy opens up and starts telling them all the secrets, including the sorority passwords, and just starts telling them everything they wanted to know. And it didn't take waterboarding, it didn't take intimidation, didn't take any of this stuff. It was just building trust and familiarity over time, plus a little curiosity hook with the newspaper up in front of his face. And so through this experience and a bunch of others, Jack had identified that there's a natural pattern that human beings go through to develop trust and friendship. And so that's where he came up with this friendship formula. It's proximity, frequency, duration, and intensity. Basically, if we increase all of these, then people are going to trust us more and become more friendly towards us, which is kind of cool. Or if we were to try to summarize this in one word, I just like to call it familiarity. The more we're around somebody, then the more they'll trust us. And so as we're going out to events or for participating on LinkedIn, whatever we can do, we're starting to build that familiarity and building relationships of trust. Skip through some of this. I think that you guys have seen this in my presentations a lot, but the balancing act here that I'm always trying to find is a balance between being likable and warm and trustworthy, but also confident and competent. That's the kind of relationships we want and the kind of messages we want to convey that's going to get us the most opportunities. Have I shown this version of the slides to you, Lauren, in one of our presentations?
I haven't seen it in your presentation. I saw when I was looking at it, and I think it's so funny because it's so true. It's interesting. You can start thinking about all those different characters, and everyone obviously knows Harry Potter. So the perfect way to put it.
Harry Potter. Yeah. So Voldemort has lots of confidence and power, but he's kind of a jerk. So that doesn't give him a lot of job opportunities. Yes. He has to just use force to get his way. And then you get Neville Longbottom, I think his name is. He's very warm and trustworthy, but nobody sees him as competent, and that doesn't get you job opportunities. And then, of course, Crabbe and Goyle can't do anything right, and nobody likes them. But you get the Dumbledores and the Harry Potters that are confident and powerful, but they're also likable. People like them. Those are the ones that can really advance in their career effectively. So the first tip then, if it's been pretty obvious at this point, is to just attend events. And this can be virtual events. It doesn't have to be in person. About 2 weeks ago, I presented at a data conference that was an international conference, but it was all online. It was all virtual. It could be just participating on forums or meetups, going to local meetups. There's tons of those. But going to these events, just like the like switch, is going to start building familiarity and trust. And as I mentioned, that Lauren and I are going to be at this conference this Saturday, and it's a free one. It's a free conference where you can go help hone your technical skills while also meeting people. And even if you don't want to actually talk to people, which I get, even if you just do a small effort, even if you're just present, even if you're just around, then that can start to work. So look at these events that are out in your community. This was another one that I went to recently for Snowflake. If you go to meetup.com, there's tons of them, depending on what your area of focus is. But just being present online on your LinkedIn is building out that friendship formula. People are going to see you more often and become more familiar with their name. It's the secret why politicians plaster their names everywhere during an election. They know that most of us are probably not researching the issues and the candidates as much as we should. And they also know that we're probably going to make a gut decision anyway, rather than one based off facts. And so when we go into the voting booth and we're trying to decide who we're going to vote for and what we're going to vote for, we'll be like, oh, well, yeah, Jake, that name sounds familiar. I guess I'll vote for him. Right or wrong, that's kind of how it works. And so it can work the same with us. As our name is out there on LinkedIn or on forums where people are seeing our face, they're more likely to think of you. Or imagine if someone's got a stack of resumes that they're going through trying to decide who to hire. It's kind of like that room where if you're a room full of strangers and an acquaintance walks in, stranger, as you're going through the stack of resumes, and then boom, there's a name I recognize. That doesn't guarantee you a job, obviously, but it increases the chances that they're going to look closer at your resume and increases the chances that you might get an interview. So I inadvertently did this. Have I told you my caving story?
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't realize that this is what I was doing at the time. But in Utah, actually all over the United States, there's these clubs called grottos where people get together and go caving. So speaking of tribes, this is a tribe. This is one of those networking circles. And when I was a teenager, I used to do lots of climbing and caving. But mostly the caves I did were up in Wyoming. And the Utah caving community, the cavers are very secretive. I guess kind of like your sorority. They want to protect the caves, and they want to protect dumb people from hurting themselves in the caves. And so as a result of that, they're pretty careful. They're very careful about telling people where the caves are. Usually what it takes is you have to go join their club. And then over time, they'll trust you more, and then they'll start taking you to some introductory caves and things like that. But you really have to go through this long period of building trust with them. And as a teenager, I didn't want to do that. I've been caving for years, and I was like, I don't want to join your club just so I can go exploring. And so I kind of resisted it. I didn't want to go to their meetings and things like that. But I did start just participating online in caving forums. And I'd just contribute, I'd comment, I'd share interesting articles or pictures of trips. And I like I said, I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but I was starting to have people recognize my name and face more and more. Until one time I did go to an event, and one of the cavers is like, yeah, Jeff Baird, that name sounds familiar. Did we go caving together? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. We go caving all the time. And then they started giving me cave locations. And it was a little bit of a hack with that too. I didn't have to go to the clubs. Just the name familiarity and the face familiarity was enough that now they're starting to trust me. And so if that was in a professional world, that means I have an edge on getting an opportunity as well.
Well, I think you bring up a good point too, Jeff, because I think a lot of people, again, don't want to put themselves out there before they know someone. When they go to networking events, if someone can't go with them, a lot of people won't end up going because they don't have that safety blanket. But it's kind of almost like dating. Like if you put yourself out there online and you can form these connections with people that are very surface connections, but still connections online, to be able to transition to going to networking events in person are going to be that much easier as well. And you already have people that recognize your name when you go.
Exactly. And so even if you're just doing a little bit of this, it helps a lot. In fact, I had one job opportunity that came my way where the internal recruiter for the company was trying to get me to come in for an interview. And apparently they'd already decided on a couple candidates they'd wanted to proceed with, but he said, you should talk to Jeff first. I've known him for years. You should talk to him before you move forward. And the funny thing is I don't remember ever meeting him. And I guess I did somewhere along the line, but it definitely wasn't a close relationship. It was something casual. Maybe we never did meet. Maybe it was like the caving thing that we never actually went caving together. But somewhere he built up enough familiarity and trust from me to be willing to put his career on the line and pitch me to the decision makers. So that was cool. I didn't have to apply on the website and hope that I got through the ATS. It just happens. So that's kind of what we're after here. So then related to this though, if you want to step up your game, besides just attending an event, is you can start presenting at an event. And this is something we'll get into in more detail on the conference on Saturday. But we're trying to find this balance of likability and competence. The likability and trust comes from name and facial familiarity. But if you're presenting or contributing to a community, then that greatly boosts your perceptions of competence. There's a National Geographic's Brain Games that I think we'll show on Saturday, where they're talking about the fallacy expert, and it's based on these studies that they do where they'll just have somebody wear attire that makes them look like they're professional, like somebody dressed as a newscaster or a doctor's coat or like a construction yellow vest or something like that. And the assumption people have is that they're legitimate, that they are an expert in that field just from what they look like. In fact, I saw a funny YouTube where these guys were trying to sneak into different theme parks and movie theaters just by having one of those construction worker vests. They just put that on and then they just walk into places. And it was working really well. They got into movie theaters. They got into, I don't remember which major theme park. It was Universal or if it was Disneyland. But
holy cow!
Yeah, they took it to that extreme and got into a lot of places because that's the expert fallacy. If they look the part, then we're going to think, okay, yeah, they're probably an expert. So presenting at an event, the assumption is the default bias is that they're an expert and they know what they're doing. And what's cool is that it doesn't necessarily have to be on a topic related to your normal job. That was one thing that I was struggled with when I wanted to start speaking more is I don't know this stuff as well as a lot of people out in the industry. And I'd feel like some imposter syndrome, I'd feel like I wasn't at their level to be able to be teaching something. But if you found something, just some way of contributing, you can still benefit from the expert fallacy and people will still see you as confident. That's one of the ways that I got into the body language speaking. Body language doesn't directly have anything to do with IT, but it got me on lots of stages and got me in front of lots of people. And that's helped build out that network of people that will be more likely to give me opportunities. So that's what we're doing on Saturday, right? We're eating our own dog food. And it doesn't have to be necessarily presenting to it. It could be articles that you're writing and submitting, or even here's another kind of shortcut to it. Just sharing other people's articles or events on LinkedIn, then they'll associate that with you as well. So even if you're just, hey, I found this cool article and you're sharing it, that can have a halo effect and help boost your competence ratings too, which is cool. All right, so we've got one more tip for today, and then we'll save the rest for Saturday. And this one has to do with the primacy effect. There's a couple different definitions of the primacy effect, but this particular one is if I'm going to introduce Lauren to somebody, and I whatever words I use to describe her is going to stick in their brains and make them more likely to see her with that word and with that association. If I say she's a hard worker, she's awesome, she's great at connecting you with awesome opportunities, now the person's going to be more predisposed to see her in that way. It's kind of like being deliberate with building out what their prejudice is going to be and what their bias is going to be. So that's the primacy effect. And so in these networks, as we're building out these networks, rather than us submitting our resume and trying to pitch ourselves to a company in an interview, if we can get them to do it, and you want to do this in an authentic way. This isn't manipulating, but if they go to bat for you, if they get you the referral, if they get you an interview, if they feel comfortable telling them how awesome you are, then that's much more powerful than us trying to convince them. So once we've established this big network of ours that we're talking about, then we want to start leveraging that network. We want to start reaching out to people that are in our network when we are interested in opportunities. And my advice is to do this early and often, even when you don't need a job. Particularly if there's a company that you may want to work for down the road, maybe they don't even have a position yet, you can start making connections with people so that when the opportunity does come, they're comfortable with providing a referral for you. And so that's our Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, I think on that note too, I think when especially with like recruiting firms, when we're calling out, no one wants to work with recruiting firms. Sometimes they get a really bad reputation. But I always tell people it's like having your name in a stack of resumes. You could apply online and be put in a stack of 100 people also applying for that position. The likelihood that they're going to take the time to go through all those applications is not as likely as opposed to someone going in and saying, I've met this person online, or I've met this person, I know their skill set, we've discussed it in depth, and it brings your resume to life as opposed to just being a blank piece of paper with words on it.
I love that, because the recruiters, their goals are aligned with yours, and so they can be your primacy effect. They can be your referral. And I'm glad you brought it up too, because there is, I do see resistance out there to using recruiters sometimes. Do you know why that is? You mentioned that there's kind of a stigma.
I think a lot of times they think that we are the middleman and they want to just cut straight to the hiring manager. And so they think that if they can do it themselves, that'll be a more effective way, which makes sense in some companies. It works, but in a lot of times, again, they just get put in a large pool of candidates. So I think for them, it's more of they're cautious about what that looks like. They don't quite understand. And I think when we don't understand or don't know something, we are automatically cautious about something. So it's more we just need to educate people as to why they want to use recruiting firms, the importance of using recruiting firms, and what they're going to get out of it. I think if they have that knowledge, then they're way more likely to use a recruiting firm if they understand how it works.
That makes sense. And I'm trying to think about it from my perspective, because I'll get emails and phone calls. Actually, it's so often now that I don't pick up my phone now if I don't recognize the number. And that makes me realize something, that there's good and bad recruiters too. There's the spray and pray kind, that you just get someone you don't know from some other state that is casting a very wide net and then reaching out to you. Like I've done a lot in the data warehousing space. That's where most of my career's been. And so I'll get recruiting contacts for actual physical warehouse positions.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, you didn't really look at my resume, my background to see if this is a match. You did some very high level keyword search. And so it felt very impersonal, and it definitely wasn't a match. In fact, I've had 2 times where I had a recruiter reach out to me for a position that was on my team. I was the hiring manager for the position.
Oh, yeah.
And one time I finally just decided to play with them a little bit. They said, hey, are you interested in this opportunity? And I knew it was for my team, and I was just like, okay, sure. Because I wanted to see how long it would take before they realized they're like, oh, he's the hiring manager. So there's good and bad recruiters. There are the spray and pray ones that don't do their research to find out if you're a good match. But there's lots of good ones. I've had great experiences with Apex, both as a hiring manager and with career hacking and speaking opportunities. You know, they can take the time to make sure that you're finding good opportunities that are a good match for you, that it's a good mutual match between the company and the candidate. And it's free.
Yes. I think that's another misconception is I've had people say, how much do you charge? How much do I pay you? And so I think like we're not a headhunting company where you pay us. It's more we're just going to work for you, trying to make that match.
Exactly. So if it's a free resource, I tend to tackle things on multiple fronts. And so if I do want to have a personal connection or reach out myself to hiring manager, cool. But let's also have recruiters looking. It's getting more feeds out there, more feelers out there to try to find the opportunities. Cool. So I think that's it today, but put a plug in there for this video podcast. Feel free to subscribe. We recently doubled our subscribers from 6 to 12. So
that's awesome.
Actually, it might be 15 now, so we're rolling now. So if you're finding this useful and you want to keep having some of this content to help you in managing your career, then please subscribe. And we're working on some online courses that you can do. Right now we have a free interview hacking course, ways that you can help increase your chances in the interview that you'll get a job opportunity, and how you can change the dynamic of the interview so that they're trying to sell you on the position instead of you trying to sell yourself on the match. So feel free to go to itcareerhacking.com and check that out as well. Any other thoughts or comments, Lauren?
We'd love to see y'all tomorrow if you can come. I know that Jeff has a ton more to dive into, and it'll be an awesome opportunity for you to also network with some like-minded people.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks everyone for listening.